Welcome back to Bookkast, Bestsellers in Minutes, and today we're tackling Careless People, a cautionary tale of power, greed, and lost idealism by Sarah Wynn-Williams.
Oh, that's a mouthful.
It is, but it's worth every syllable, trust me. This book climbed the bestseller charts for a reason. It's a first-hand look at Facebook, the company, the culture, the power, all during a period of just explosive growth and intense scrutiny. We're going to unpack all of that today, all those juicy bits. With me, as always, is the brilliant Sarah, who knows this stuff inside and out.
Thanks. Always happy to be here. For our listeners, for those of you who are trying to stay ahead of the curve and want to grasp those big, complex ideas quickly, but without sacrificing depth, this book is an absolute must.
Couldn't agree more. So Sarah, let's jump right in. Wynn-Williams, she talks about this Facebook epiphany she had back in 2009. She was living in DC at the time, but she found herself, connecting back to her life in New Zealand through Facebook.
Right. And back then, Facebook, it was what? Maybe 400 million users? Still sort of seen as, a thing for college kids.
Yeah, exactly.
But she saw something different, didn't she? She saw its potential, especially in politics, and how it was changing the game.
Absolutely. She gives this example of a New Zealand politician just sharing these really personal moments online, and a friend of hers, who was a newly elected member of parliament, actually engaging with voters directly.
And at that time, that was pretty revolutionary. This kind of direct connection between politicians and the public, it was brand new.
It was uncharted territory. And for Wynn-Williams, it really resonated with how she saw the world changing, this interconnectedness, and she knew she had to be a part of it.
So she decides she wants to work at Facebook, but it's not like they have a global public policy expert position just waiting for her.
No, not at all.
She basically had to invent the role, make the case for why Facebook needed it.
And her background was interesting. She came from the UN, working on international treaties, dealing with global regulations.
Big, complex stuff, like genetically modified organisms.
And she realized, look, as Facebook grows internationally, it's going to face similar pressures. Governments are going to want to regulate data, regulate content, and she saw this coming a mile away.
So she goes into her interview, she sits down with Marn Levine, and she's laying out this vision, this proactive approach to shaping these rules before they're forced upon them.
And what was Marn's response?
Why? It really highlights the company's focus at that point.
Oh.
All about product development, getting more users, maybe not fully grasping the bigger picture, the policy side of things.
But they did hire her.
They did in July 2011 as manager of global public policy. And she walks into the DC office expecting, the typical corporate setting. And it was anything but.
Culture shock, right?
Total culture shock. Exposed pipes, unfinished concrete, bold colors, almost jarring, even fake graffiti on the walls. Like they were trying to recreate that Silicon Valley startup vibe in the heart of DC, and it just felt so out of place.
A real clash of cultures. And beyond the decor, she quickly realizes there's no playbook for what she's supposed to be doing. There are no established procedures for dealing with foreign governments.
It was a build-as-you-go situation. She was writing the strategy, crafting the talking points, all on the fly.
And it was all happening at breakneck speed because the company was obsessed with growth.
Growth above all else.
Yeah.
She talks about preparing a briefing for Sheryl Sandberg and other execs about the upcoming visit of the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Trying to get them thinking about international relations more strategically.
And that leads us to the Prime Minister's visit and Mark Zuckerberg's now infamous lack of interest in meeting with him. That really speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does. It shows where his priorities were at that time. Wynn-Williams had spent all this time organizing the meeting, following diplomatic protocol, and Zuckerberg just flat out refused.
He said, no, I already said I definitely didn't want to do that.
Point blank. It's a window into that early Facebook mindset. Product, growth, that was all that mattered. Diplomatic niceties, not so much.
Then Sheryl Sandberg arrives, and it's like a completely different energy, right?
Night and day. Zuckerberg was dismissive, but Sandberg was charm personified. She instantly connected with the Prime Minister. She had this way of making everyone feel at ease.
So different leadership styles, but both extremely effective in their own ways.
Absolutely. But it wasn't just the New Zealand delegation that had these kind of awkward encounters. Remember the German delegation? And that odd comment from Marn Levine?
Oh, yeah, that was something else.
So they're touring the office, they see these slogans everywhere, think wrong, move fast, and break things, which probably already seemed a bit reckless to them, coming from this very traditional background.
Right, it was a very different worldview.
And then, out of nowhere, Marn makes this comment about being Jewish, and then says, I don't bring that up because of the Holocaust, Just this really strange, awkward silence.
Yeah, you could cut the tension with a knife.
It makes you wonder about the company's cultural awareness, or lack thereof, and their communication style.
Definitely not your typical DC diplomacy. But amidst all of this, Wynn-Williams is trying to lay the groundwork for Facebook's global operations. She's the one who helped develop those early community guidelines and transparency reports.
Huge undertaking, and really foundational. The community guidelines were all about defining what was acceptable content, setting the boundaries for user behavior, and the transparency reports were about being more open about the pressures Facebook was facing from governments, like requests for content removal.
It was about accountability, trying to bring some structure to this rapidly expanding platform. But even with these efforts, there were internal disagreements, right? Like that whole debate about organ donation.
Oh yeah, that was a fascinating clash of perspectives. Sheryl Sandberg was pushing for Facebook to get involved in organ donation. She saw it as this massive opportunity to use their reach for good, to be a megaphone for the cause.
A noble idea on the surface.
But Wynn-Williams, coming from her background in international treaties, she saw all the red flags. The legal issues, the cultural sensitivities, the ethical implications of Facebook handling this kind of sensitive health data.
It was two very different ways of looking at the same issue. One focused on impact, the other on risk.
Exactly. And then there was the relentless drive for growth.
Mm-hmm.
The next billion users, that was the mantra. And Javi Olivon, he was the guy leading the charge.
And his trip to Colombia, that was quite the adventure, wasn't it?
It was. He goes to a salsa club late one night, and he's convinced he sees Hillary Clinton. Just imagine the energy, the chaos of trying to expand into these new markets.
Growth at all costs.
Pretty much.
Right.
And that leads us to Myanmar, which was a whole different ballgame. Wynn-Williams goes there, and she realizes that for a lot of people, Facebook is the internet.
They skipped the whole desktop computer phase and went straight to mobile.
Exactly. So Facebook, they had this incredible responsibility, almost like being a utility, but they weren't really prepared for it.
And then there's the issue of content moderation. I mean, how do you even moderate content when you're dealing with a script like Burmese, which wasn't even in Unicode at the time?
It was a nightmare. Facebook's automated tools were useless. They couldn't even identify the words. Imagine trying to find a needle in a haystack where the haystack is made of letters that your computer doesn't even recognize.
So how do you stop hate speech? How do you stop misinformation when you can't even read what people are posting?
That was the million-dollar question. And despite all the warnings, all the reports of hate speech fueling violence, Facebook's response was just too slow, too little, too late.
Devastating consequences.
Absolutely. They just didn't seem to grasp the severity of the situation on the ground. Then there's China. Zuckerberg's obsession with getting Facebook into China.
He saw it as the key to global dominance, and he was willing to make some serious compromises to get there.
He brought in these big-name advisors, Henry Kissinger, Hank Paulson, people like that. And they crafted this value proposition for the Chinese government, talking about economic benefits, aligning with the China Dream narrative. And the biggest compromise, the one that really stood out, was agreeing to store Chinese user data in China. A complete 180 from their policies everywhere else.
Wynn-Williams herself had assured governments in other countries that this would never happen. But in China, different rules applied.
It was all about market access, no matter the cost. And then you have the blocking of Guo Wengui's content, this Chinese billionaire who is criticizing the government.
A clear case of censorship to appease the Chinese authorities. Freedom of speech, not so much.
The message was clear. Play by our rules or you don't play at all.
And they even launched these 2 unauthorized apps in China, trying to sneak their way into the market.
Desperate measures. Wynn-Williams didn't even know about them until the New York Times started asking questions. Just shows you how badly they wanted to be in China. But all of this, it take a toll on Wynn-Williams. She talks about her health struggles, the pressure, the constant ethical dilemmas.
It's a heavy burden to carry.
It really is. And then there were these incidents of what she perceived as gender bias, these uncomfortable situations, particularly with someone named Joel.
Unprofessional behavior, crossing boundaries.
It all points to a company culture that wasn't exactly welcoming to women or to anyone who didn't fit the mold.
And in the end, she tries to be a voice for change, but her efforts are met with resistance. She's basically pushed out after a lack of support from Elliot Schrage.
A sad ending, but not surprising. The system was too entrenched, the priorities too skewed. She realized she couldn't change it from within.
And she comes to this conclusion that Facebook's leadership, they operated with this just business mentality, as if that excused everything.
As if the consequences, the real-world impact, didn't matter.
A chilling thought. And then you read the epilogue, and you find out that Joel, the guy who is causing so much trouble, he's still there, still climbing the ladder.
Business as usual.
It's like nothing changed, and it makes you think, what's the lesson here? What does it say about power, about accountability, about the tech industry as a whole?
It's a cautionary tale for sure. Wynn-Williams, in Careless People, has given you, our listeners, a powerful and unsettling glimpse into what happens when a company grows too big, too fast, and loses sight of its values.
This deep dive has been a whirlwind, but hopefully it's given you some serious food for thought. And remember, if you want to get the full story, all the juicy details, pick up Careless People, a cautionary tale of power, greed, and lost idealism.
Definitely worth the read.
And that's it for this episode of Bookkast. Remember, bestsellers in minutes, so you can get back to the things that really matter. See you next time.